Hi, my name is Joel Kroeker, and I'm a music therapist and a clinical counselor based on the West Coast in British Columbia. I've got a workshop coming up that you might be interested in. It's called Archetypal Music Psychotherapy, a Depth Approach to the Creative Expressive Arts. Basically, in this workshop, I'll teach you various psychodynamic principles of the approach that I've gathered from about 20 years of working with creativity-based processes and groups as a musician, as an educator, as a composer, and now more recently as a therapist. If I were forced to summarize this archetypal music psychotherapy process, I would say that the main focus is how to work with unconscious material through expressive processes in order to bring the most necessary aspects to consciousness. Of course, it's difficult to talk about unconscious processes because they're unconscious, but Carl Jung called this the shadow, so there's theory about this that can be really helpful. Basically, the idea is that our lives are largely motivated and driven by unconscious processes that are at work within. This is not a bad thing per se, it's common, happens with all of us, but it can be confusing or disorienting when our behaviors don't match our inner ideas about ourselves, right? So this causes a clash or a psychological conflict, which can be disorienting and can end us up in therapy. So this is the beauty of the work with expressive arts, because for music, for example, which where we can manifest and express the inner reality of our psyche through sound. So I'll be showing you various ways of manifesting unconscious material with clients or on your own, actually, can be helpful. As well as some theory to help you understand what's happening and how to apply this work to specific aims and goals, therapeutic aims and goals. The approach I'll be teaching is resource-based, so it's actually not deficit-based, as some modes are, but it's more what we sometimes call client-centered or resource-based, so it hones in on the client's inherent strengths and resources, and it amplifies these through the expressive arts and can be helpful for the therapist as well, by the way. Personally, I work with a diverse range of clientele, including children with developmental disability, at-risk youth, typical adult neuroses, like depression and anxiety and aspects like that, as well as geriatric populations. So I work with groups and individuals, so I'll show you how to adapt this work in a way that you can apply to the populations that you work with across the whole life cycle, or to apply to your own personal needs. Since I work as a talk therapist as well as a music therapist, I also will illustrate ways of integrating words and sounds and images in a way that effectively addresses specific therapeutic goals and aims. And by the way, when I say images, I mean that as in the largest kind of symbolic way, to include aspects of feelings, difficult emotions, thoughts, sounds, stories, dreams, interpersonal experiences, and the whole life narrative that is constantly narrating its way moment by moment through our lives, as you might notice yourself with your own life narrative. It has a way of working its way into our minds and into our lives. And these are the images that I suggest that we can work with very specifically through this process. I also want to make sure that our work together is relevant in this workshop to your particular needs and interests. So there will be time for discussion and questions and things like that. As well, I'll be checking in with you throughout the workshop to make sure that this is relevant to what you're interested in. The background of my work is based in Jungian analytical psychology and mindfulness approaches, and I'll show you how to integrate the most important or essential aspects of these into the other modalities that you work with, because there's ways of working across modalities as well, including various forms of expressive arts. So, for example, visual art and movement, I include that with musical modes. Mostly because of the multiple intelligences of clients and human beings, right? We have different ways, various ways of apprehending insight. So we'll work with that, as well as cross-culturally. That's an interesting piece as well. that we'll cover. So anyway, I've presented this work across North America and across parts of Latin America, at places like Cornell University in New York and UC Santa Cruz, and all over the place. And what I've found, even internationally, what I've found is that people are able to take this work into their own professional context, and I've been amazed at how they've been able to apply it to their own work in a very personal way. So for example, I've had photographers adapt this method into their photography work towards psychological purposes, which is interesting. Buddhist groups have applied this work into their Dharma arts teachings. I've had filmmakers, poets, visual artists, body workers, dancers, writers, who have found ways to apply these principles in their own work. And that has actually informed my work as well. So it's really interesting, that sort of cross-pollination. And in some cases, we've managed to continue the work together through Skype, which is another thing that I offer in my clinical practice. So hopefully this gives you a basic sense of this upcoming workshop, Archetypal Music Psychotherapy, a depth approach to the creative expressive arts, and I look forward to seeing you then.